I've had my Galaxy Watch 4 for almost 3 years now, and I've used it every single day, both as a smartwatch and as a fitness tracker for running, but the time has finally come to upgrade 3 whole generations ahead and try the Galaxy Watch 7. The question is it worth the upgrade? So let's start with the hardware differences then, and the first thing you'll notice is the screen is both bigger and brighter. On paper, this seemed like a relatively small upgrade, with the screen getting just 0.1 inches or 7% bigger, and the pixel density staying just about the same. But when you come to use it, the size bump helps the watch feel that bit more modern, which I think everyone wants when they're upgrading to the latest tech. The brightness is the real winner though, with the screen brightness going from 1000 nits on the old one all the way up to a whopping 2000 nits on the new one. Now, I wouldn't say I ever particularly struggled to see the old watch in bright conditions, but this new one really punches through the light no matter how bright it is, and it's really nice to have, especially if you've got sunglasses on. Another big change in the hardware, which I didn't realise I would care about as much as I do, is the upgraded processor. Now, just like the screen, I would never have called my old watch laggy, but it does feel like it now after using the Watch 7. It basically never skips a beat, always responding immediately to every touch, and it just makes me want to use it more. Where previously I was unknowingly not looking at certain things on my watch because I wasn't 100% confident a single tap or swipe would register immediately, I find myself using the new one more because I've got absolute confidence in its performance. This, for me, has actually been the biggest change, which is a real surprise because, again, I didn't feel like my old watch was especially slow or laggy. Another big change with this generation of watches is the introduction of dual band GPS. Now, this isn't new to smartwatches in general, but it is new to the Galaxy Watch series. We'll get onto the GPS accuracy a little later, but I actually said at the start of the year that I'd buy whichever watch comes with dual band GPS this year, so it is a nice addition to have. It's certainly thrown up some interesting changes, not all of them good, but again, we'll get onto that, along with heart rate monitoring differences a little later. There's a few other hardware differences to note, and first of which is the charging. You can't actually charge this watch on the back of your phone anymore. Now, this is something that I do quite rarely, but I have done it a handful of times and it is super handy feature to have. So I'm disappointed to see this feature disappear from this generation of watches. Apparently it's down to the new sensors on the bottom of the watch, but it detects the phone fine, it just chooses not to charge. It's weird though because my dual charger that I've been using for ages works absolutely fine, albeit with a little delay before it starts charging. Maybe the new generation of Galaxy phones, which normally come out in January, will bring this feature back. I can only hope. One thing which I hope has changed since the Watch 4 is the strap. Now, my original strap on the Watch 4 broke after around 6 months, and they only provide a 6-month warranty with straps, which was news to me. I never got a picture of the broken strap to show you, but I've been running this third-party one for about 2.5 years now, and it's actually been pretty solid, but only time will tell if the strap on the Watch 7 is stronger than the old one. So moving on to the software then, and honestly, if you've updated your watch as software updates are released, there won't be too much difference here. It's still Wear OS, and honestly, I still love it. I think Wear OS strikes a great balance between usability, wide app availability, and performance. No complaints from me. The only major software change that I noticed was the addition of the readiness score. The idea of this is that it basically gives you a rating out of 100 for how ready your body is for the day ahead. Other companies call this the body battery. Now, this is a cool idea, but I have my reservations and they've only been partially alleviated. So most of it is based on how well you slept, how consistently you slept, and what your heart rate was doing while you slept. The only other measurement it takes is your previous day's activity, which is my only remaining reservation about the readiness score. So you can choose from 4 different activity levels, but not a single one comes close to my real active life. It seems the readiness score wants you to do the exact same amount of activity every single day, and if you go over or under, your readiness score drops. This just doesn't work for most people that are active and have an office job. You don't go for a run every single day or the gym every single day, so your score will rarely be good. For me, I go for a run about 3 times a week, and the other days I'm mainly at home working at my desk. So some days my previous day activity is wildly under what it wants me to do, and other days it's wildly over. It even tells me off my heart rate being too high during exercise sometimes. Now, this doesn't massively impact my score. If I'm well rested and in good health, it will still give me a score in the 80s, but I don't think it will ever get higher than that, and I don't think it helps to be told that my activity levels need attention when I'm going for 30 kilometers of runs per week. Other than that though, the readiness score has actually been surprisingly useful. I drank a small amount of alcohol on a Friday night and felt completely fine for the morning park run the next day, but I was surprised to see my time slightly slower than 2 weeks before, despite pushing harder. It truly baffled me, but on checking my readiness score, I could see that it had dropped to my lowest score yet of 63, because my heart rate during my sleep was way higher than normal. Now that must only be the few ciders that I had the night before, but it was interesting because I couldn't feel any negative effects, but clearly my heart could. Now the next day, I drank far more alcohol than I care to admit, and that really punished my score the next day, all the way down to 46. Again, this was primarily driven by my sleeping heart rate, and I did feel pretty bad the next day. So overall, the previous day activity metric aside, the readiness score is actually a really useful indication of how ready your body is and can genuinely tell you things that you may not have even detected yourself. I never actually wore my Watch 4 at night for comfort reasons, but I will be continuing to wear my Watch 7 at night, and that's primarily because of the readiness score. So on to using the watch for running then, and on my first run I ran with both the Watch 4 and the Watch 7 to compare them directly on an identical run, which threw up some really interesting results. So the first thing you notice is the improved screen. Being slightly bigger and significantly brighter just makes it that much easier to read, so you're spending less time trying to read your watch and more time concentrating on running. The heart rate monitoring seemed to be largely unchanged, which surprised me because you'd think 3 generations of sensor improvements would be noticeable. Most of the time, the heart rate readings were within a few BPM of each other, but a couple of times one watch was reading either too high or too low, and honestly, I think both were a little bit off at times. Now, it must be said that your wrist is a pretty bad place to read your heart rate from, so I think this is the biggest problem, rather than how good the sensors are. I've also noticed that both watches seem to use some sort of algorithm to try and smooth out the readings, which is why it takes a bit of time at the start of the run to read accurately. It also sometimes struggles with interval training for some reason, which doesn't seem to have changed much in the 3 generations. The GPS though is a much bigger change, going from a regular GPS to dual band GPS, and this is where I found one of the biggest changes between the two. Before we get into the Watch 7, I must just talk about the software improvements that were seen on the Watch 4 just under a year ago. At launch, the Watch 4 didn't have very accurate GPS. When running along a road, it would often drift either side, and over just 5 kilometers, it would add something like 200 meters to the run, so pretty woefully inaccurate. But in an update that I got in October 2023, things were improved drastically, and I don't use that word lightly. Look at this map comparing 2 runs on the exact same route. It's like I've upgraded the watch hardware itself. It's quite incredible that they were able to improve the accuracy by this much from a software update. Now, I believe they primarily achieved this with a smoothing algorithm, so where previously it was zigzagging, I think now they just smooth that out and the results are considerably more accurate. So since this update, the Watch 4 has actually been a pretty accurate GPS watch, so I was excited to see what adding dual band GPS into the mix would bring. But unfortunately, at launch at least, the Watch 7 is actually less accurate on GPS than the Watch 4 was. Now, I do believe that the actual GPS signal is more accurate, particularly under trees and near buildings where dual band excels, but what Samsung seems to have done is gotten rid of that smoothing algorithm that I just praised so much. Now, obviously this, in theory, is desirable, because if the GPS was pinpoint accurate enough, you don't want to be artificially smoothing it out unnecessarily. But as clearly evidenced by my side-by-side experience of these 2 watches, that algorithm needs to make a comeback. Hopefully Samsung can fix this in a software update. I'd say we need to just bring the same old algorithm back, but just turn it down a little bit compared to the Watch 4, because the Watch 7 has got that much more accurate GPS sensor in it. It feels weird to have an upgraded GPS with worse accuracy, so hopefully Samsung do something about this. A quick mention on the benefits of having the 4G variant of the watch, which isn't new to this generation, but I only had the Wi-Fi variant previously. Now, I must say that I'm impressed. It's nice to be able to remain connected when you're out without the need for a phone, particularly on longer runs. What's the weather like today? I actually often run with my Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses too, which I'll review soon, so it means when I'm out, I've got internet, Google Assistant, YouTube Music, all my notifications, providing my phone is connected to the internet somewhere, the ability to call, a camera, and some headphones, all from 2 lightweight wearable devices. Although you don't need all of that when you're just out for a run, it is nice to have them as a backup should you get into trouble by either getting lost or injured. Plus, not needing to worry about downloading music ahead of time is nice. Play Royal Blood. The only real drawback is the price, and it's not actually the price of the device, as it's only about £50 more for the full 4G variant, which I think is actually quite reasonable. It's the cost of the connection. I'm on the EE network, and they charge about £7 per month for my watch connection, which I think is pretty outrageous considering most people will very rarely use the watch on its own. I'd rather pay maybe a couple of pounds and have limited data. 1 GB would likely be enough for the simplistic things that I do on my watch. Onto the battery life then, and overall the battery life seems to be pretty similar to my old watch, which is impressive considering the upgrades. So during a typical day of minimal, normal use, I tend to use 20 to 30% per 24 hours, which includes sleep tracking. I do have my always on display switched off, but just about everything else is on, including the raise to wake feature. On a run with GPS enabled, it uses something in the region of 10% per hour, which is more than enough for any run I'll ever do. Where it starts to ramp up though is if you have 4G enabled, when it uses 25 to 30% per hour, which is a lot. I will say though that was with not only the 4G connection enabled all the time, but also a Bluetooth connection to my headphones, music playing the whole time, and maybe 2 or 3 Google queries per hour. So that's pretty much maxing it out, but the battery will run flat on you if you go out for too long with the 4G enabled. Now I should say it's the same for phones though. 4G does just use a lot of battery, but you can switch it off in the settings if you want to make your battery last longer. Overall, I really like the Galaxy Watch 7, and I think it's well worth the upgrade from the Galaxy Watch 4. It's 3 generations newer and it really feels it, with big improvements to the screen, performance, and the readiness score is a worthwhile addition. I just hope they can patch the GPS inaccuracies, and hopefully one day they can bring back the back of the phone wireless charging. Side note, I actually really like the subtle green colour this year. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Do drop a sub if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.